I don't know exactly what your photography gear looks like, but for me, camera buddies come and go. Similarly, lenses come and I will sell them eventually. But there is 5 lenses that I consider the absolute best on Fuji X-Mount, and it's probably lenses that I will never ever sell again. And these 5 lenses I want to present to you today, and make sure to stick for the last one because I have noticed that there is an interesting correlation between this lens and my absolutely best photos that I have ever taken, and I want to explore why. So I would say without further ado, let's get started. Just briefly, a quick note on transparency. All of the lenses that I will present to you today were bought with my own money, so no company, lens camera manufacturer had any impact on what I will say or what I will present in today's video. But now, let's get actually started. Let me start with the best compact lens, in my opinion at least. And there I first wanted to give an honorable mention to the very camera that's filming me today, which is the Fuji X100VI, because that camera has a lens built in and it's basically a pancake, and it yet retains an f2.8 maximum aperture, and it's probably a good contender to be the best compact Fuji lens if you take into account how small it is relative to how much light it can actually gather, and optically it's also very good. But how about my favorite lens for interchangeable Fujifilm cameras, and that lens is the XF 35mm f2. And generally speaking, what I value for compact lenses is that they are optically very good, that they are reasonably compact, obviously, and that they are really well built. And you'll be surprised by how many lenses actually meet these 3 criteria. But Fujifilm has gotten this right when they released the Fujicron f2 series of lenses, because they meet all of these 3 criteria. They are very good optically, they're highly compact, and they are weather resistant and super well built. And the 35mm f2 is no exception. It is by far the smallest of the Fujicron lenses. It's, to my understanding, also the cheapest of the Fujicrons. And in my opinion, a 50mm, especially when you're looking for your first prime lens, is actually really nice, because it's not too wide, which might make your frames very cluttered, but also not too tight, meaning that you still have a great degree of versatility while using it. And when I don't really know what lens to attach to my X-T5, and I don't really know what I will photograph or whether I will even photograph in the first place, the XF 35mm f2 is the lens I choose, because I can do basically anything with it. It's nice and compact, and even when it rains, I know that my equipment is safe. And by the way, this lens actually comes in 2 iterations. The first one is the XF version, so the very premium one that I just described. And the second one is the XC version, which is the same optical formula, the same autofocus, the same looks to your image, and yet it is only half the price because it's only plastic construction and it's lacking weather sealing and an aperture ring. So if these are features you don't necessarily care about, you can actually save a lot of money and get basically the same photos for only half the price of the XF version. But if you care about weather sealing and premium build quality, then the XF version is definitely worth the money. Alright, the next lens on my list is the optically most perfect lens that I have ever used on Fuji X-Mount. And trust me, I have used many of the best optics on this platform, but I have not really found a lens that matches in quality the XF 18mm f1.4. The XF 18mm f1.4 is fantastic. If you really want to see what it means to resolve 40 megapixels on an X-T5, then just mount this lens to your camera and you will see how much detail you can possibly capture if you have a lens who takes full advantage of that resolution like the 18mm f1.4 does. But also beyond pure sharpness, this is just the most fantastic lens because it also has the softest, most beautiful bokeh. There is no chromatic aberrations anywhere. It does have an aperture ring and full metal, full weather sealing. It has also the best autofocus that I've ever seen on any Fujifilm lens. It's very snappy. That doesn't mean that you're not going to miss shots, but that's due to, well, the Fujifilm camera buddies. But it is really just overly the best Fuji lens that I have ever used. And the only real downside to this lens is actually that it's just unbelievably pricey. And honestly, if I had to reconsider whether to get this lens again today, I'm not sure whether I would actually pick it up, because at around €1,000, it's really pricey relative to the amount of times that I actually take it out and shoot with it, just simply because for me personally, 18mm on APS-C or 28mm on full frame is just simply a little bit too wide for my taste. But if you're a fan of the 18mm focal length, honestly there is no better 18mm lens than the 18mm f1.4. Alright, the next category of the best lens on my list is the bokeh category. So the lens that produces the best, most creamy bokeh blurry backgrounds that I have honestly ever seen. And to be honest, there is very strong competition as to which lens produces the best bokeh on Fuji X-Mount. And there is, for instance, the 56mm f1.2 generation 1, generation 2, there's the 90mm f2, and there is the 50mm f1.0. But none of these lenses is, in my opinion, better than the lens that I'm going to present to you in this category when it comes to the best bokeh, and my choice is the Viltrox 75mm f1.2. And this lens is just a crazy combination of a tight focal length, 75mm, and an unbelievably wide aperture. But it doesn't stop at only amount of bokeh you can produce, but it's also just the overall package and value proposition of this lens that beats, in my opinion, every other lens that I have mentioned previously. What's absolutely outstanding to me is how sharp this lens is at f1.2, because you shoot this thing at f1.2 and you stop it down and there is like virtually no improvement at all. Additionally, it has this razor thin depth of field that everything that's only half a centimeter behind or in front of the focus plane is actually already blurry. And when you combine this with this unbelievable sharpness wide open, it's really truly mind-blowing how your subject will pop out of your frame. And I personally own the 56mm f1.2 by Fujifilm, and even that lens does not produce the same amount of bokeh nor the same sharpness wide open. And that's not to say that the Fuji 56 is bad, because it's still among the best optical performers, but from a feeling point of view, the Viltrox 75mm always just seemed a little bit sharper wide open. Additionally, the Viltrox actually has also significantly better autofocus than the 56mm f1.2, and it is also just half the price of the 56mm f1.2, and this just makes it really hard to justify spending more money on a 56 f1.2 when you can get better bokeh, the same or more sharpness than that very lens, and actually better autofocus. But is the 75mm perfect? Well, there is two things that I would like to point out here. First of all, that the 75mm focal length is quite restrictive, because if you, for instance, want to take a full body portrait, you're really going to stand back quite significantly. And if you want to give instructions to your model, it's not going to be very easy, while on a 56mm, for instance, I still found it to be quite manageable. The other downside of this lens is the flare performance. It's not as well controlled as a 56mm f1.2, because at a few angles of the sun you can actually get relatively washed out images from this lens against the sun, and you also get purple rings around your frame, which can actually be used creatively, but it's sometimes more distracting than it adds to the scene. Alright, let's address the next category of best lenses, and that is the best zoom lens. And my pick will be quite controversial here, because you may already have noticed a pattern by now, which is that I really care about compact sizes and about ruggedness. And I have found it to be surprisingly difficult to find a zoom lens that actually combines these two features in one single lens. Because yes, on the one hand you have these constant f2.8 zooms like the ones by Fuji, or even an f1.8 zoom like the one from Sigma, but these lenses are simply too big for my own liking. And at the same time you have lenses that are totally compact, like the Sigma 18 to 50mm f2.8 that is unbelievably small for the fact that it's a constant f2.8 zoom, but this lens is lacking the ruggedness because it's not weather sealed. And that for me personally means that the best pick, or my personal favorite zoom lens, is the new 16 to 50mm f2.8 to f4.8 lens. So let me explain. This lens is sharp. It has really good autofocus. It has weather sealing. It has an internal zoom. It has nothing missing. And honestly, as somebody like me who doesn't really care too much about shallow depth of field, I'm totally fine with it. And similarly for low light photography, I honestly most of the time rely on prime lenses like the 35mm f2 or the X106, or lenses that just let in more light than even an f2.8 zoom would give me. And that said, I have actually used the 16-50 for low light photography already, and honestly when you know what you're doing, you can really get fantastic low light results out of that lens too. Let me know what you think about these photos, but they honestly don't really look like they came out of a variable apertured kit lens. Alright, then my final pick is the best overall general purpose lens. And this lens is also again controversial, but it's basically the lens that I would pick up if I had to do a little bit of everything. Street photography, portrait work, low light photography. If I had to take one lens, it would be this one. And it is the Viltrox 27mm f1.2. First of all, this lens is unbelievably sharp, wide open. It has beautiful bokeh, which especially with a wide angle or a wider angle lens like the 27mm focal length, you can actually really separate your subject from the background, and it's a really, really nice look. And honestly, many people have praised 40mm to be the new 50mm or the 35mm killer, and I understand why. Because it just gives you a very natural look, very close to that of the human vision. And if you combine it with this maximum aperture of f1.2, you can really create some fantastic photos. And this also explains why the Viltrox 27mm f1.2 has been consistently the lens that has given me the results that I'm personally the most happy with. Does it have any downsides? Well, in my opinion, there is two. The first one is that this lens has also a bit of a flare problem. In my opinion, less than the 75mm f1.2, but it is still pronounced. It still has these rings, and depending on the angle toward the light source, you do get a washed out image. But honestly, if you get used to the lens, there is a few ways to work around it, like stopping down, for instance, or just making slight adjustments to the camera angle to make sure that this flare is gone. The other more significant downside of this lens is that it's really big. Like, it's not unmanageably big. Like, a full frame user would probably tell me that this is actually not a big lens at all, and it's actually, I don't know, an everyday carry, they would probably say. But it is a relatively big lens. And the real question you need to answer yourself is whether it's really worth it to have an f1.2 lens, which gives you a look that's basically indistinguishable from a lens that only opens to f1.4, but it is a lens that's also 30 to 40% bigger than a conventional f1.4 lens. And this is, for instance, why for some people it may be better to invest in the 33mm f1.4 by Fuji. It is more expensive, it gathers less light, but given it's significantly lighter, it may be the better pick for some people. But given the Viltrox is the significantly cheaper lens, it is f1.2, it is 27mm and not 33mm, there is actually good reasons to pick it up over the 33mm f1.4, and regarding sharpness, I have found the 27mm to actually be better than the 33mm by Fujifilm that I've also owned for a while. And now I'm actually genuinely curious, which is your favorite Fuji lens? Let me know in the comment section below, because there are so many good lenses these days that my selection also probably doesn't capture it all. And if you're now still interested why it's probably a bad idea to mount a full frame lens to your Fuji APS-C camera, then I invite you to check out this video up here. And with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in today, and I hopefully see you in the next video. Bye.